In this video, I'll show you a cutting technique. The beauty of this cutting technique is that it tapers to a point. There's also a layering involved, and those layers run nicely into that. He moves on, very clear cutting technique. So if you're curious, check out the video. You also see a bonding technique in this. I did that using 14 foils, a very quick technique, and that video is also on my YouTube channel. So if you want to see the coloring technique too, then check the other video. For the cutting technique, stay here and watch all the instructions I give. The cutting technique is suitable for medium to long hair. Here I am showing the department. I start with a bang section, with a day parting to the outer corner of the eyebrow. Then a small horseshoe. On top, I section off. And if I show it like this, you can sort of see a Pac-Man, a little circle on top. Then I go to a part behind the ear, a part in the middle and on the occipital bone. And the other side parting must be in the same spot as on the other side. I will work with a fixed guideline. So that means my body is always where I am cutting, you stay in front of it. You cut your pass off in the vertical lines. Your next pass that comes after that, you can see that here as well. I section it off nicely and bring it forward following my guideline. So the distance is a bit longer that he covers to that first cutting line. This creates more length towards the back. And so I can nicely work into that point which I eventually want to see at the back. So you can bring everything forward. Where you're cutting, that's where your body is, making sure you're projecting everything towards that fixed guideline. And you connect everything to your vertical parting. On the other side, I do exactly the same. So I take my vertical partition, but I want my layering to be exactly the same as on the other side. So I take a small section on the other side to measure my length, and then I know where to cut to match the other side. Also here, stick to your fixed guideline. Cutting off your pass in a vertical line, and the underlying passes also come forward after your fixed guide to create that extra length backwards. Now I'm using my scissors, but would it allow itself? You could also perfectly cut this with a knife. When you start cutting with the knife, make sure you place it where the tension is, so in front of your fingers. Here I flip my slip again, so you can clearly see that I can bring the length forward to create extra length at the back. From here, I am moving to a new guideline, which is the line straight behind the ear. I want it on the back too. Having my layers in a point, if I were to project everything to the front, to that guideline, then my layers at the back would become too heavy. So I shift my guideline just behind the ear. I am going to continue in exactly the same way. So my body is for the passé. I project everything to that fixed guideline and cut. And again, I cut off everything in my vertical line. Because I project everything outward from my fixed guideline, I thus create extra length at the back and everything flows nicely. In that point, which I want to see at the end, I'm using a palm-to-palm technique. That means my hand, where the hair is caught, is low, and my cutting hand is above it. Is somewhat higher, and that the palms point towards each other. The big advantage of that is that my back and my body just stay straight. Because let's face it, the hairdressing profession can be quite hard on your body. So the palm-to-palm technique is the very best for your posture. I move from here to the other side again, because I always like to keep things even. Imagine if one side is just a bit longer than the other, you can make the other side a bit longer too. Easy to correct. Because when you're all done and you notice that one side is longer than the other, you're quite busy getting it all back. So again, a fixed guideline just behind the ear, project everything towards it so you get extra length at the back. I mentioned at the start of the video that this cut line is suitable for medium to long hair. So you understand when I'm going to cut this line into a half-long refrigerator, that my first pass is really a bit shorter, otherwise I wouldn't see my layering at the back. So then you always have to take into account the length you start with. Then I start at the bottoms, and the front part, I'll just clip it away to have a clear workspace. If the passage is too large, just remove a piece. And now I'm locking the bottom part, the guideline on behind the ear. So I also project the hair towards it. It's an exact cutting technique because I project the hair towards it. Project both sides outwards to that vertical line and trim everything off there. Here you can see it well again from the back. Project it towards the guideline from behind and cut it off. Put it back in place to continue with the other side, so you always have an easy workspace, and that way you work very systematically. When you take the time to properly divide before cutting, you'll have this cutting line set in 15 minutes. Always make sure the hair is washed. Because as soon as you start cutting long hair and you begin spraying it with a spray bottle, then you'll notice that you're all combing for much longer because the hair gets knotted. It doesn't comb through nicely. And to create speed in your work and to work accurately, it's best to always wash the client, condition well so you can easily work through and that you can do your knees properly. Have the square in it like that, or stubbs. From here, I'm going to the top side. I'm letting it loose and dividing it into 4 sections. The parting I make on top runs parallel to the parting below it, just behind the ear. Because this way I can project the top section forward to my front guideline so it nicely connects with the layer underneath. Because I don't want any disconnections, it should align nicely with each other. I come straight at it and I search for my guideline from below and then cut the top to match the underlying part neatly. Behind per se, then I come to the guideline just behind the ear and connect it nicely there too, until the entire dome is nicely connected. In this way, I manage as well. That diagonal line or that layer of points, the level of layers, I get that on the top side, I incorporate it in. On the other side, I do exactly the same. So, I'm projecting the front part forward again. My body is in front of my guideline and I'm cutting it off vertically. What I basically do is a vertical line on both sides of the head. I imagine it in my mind and I close everything there. I connect it there. This way you get the cutting lines in quickly. When dealing with very thick hair, I wouldn't cut this pass in one go, but then I would divide it into 2 passes. This cutting line is also suitable for fine hair. But always keep in mind that when you introduce layers to fine hair, the bottom will become thinner. So I always advise clients with fine hair to keep the bottom length a bit higher, just above the shoulder. That's always the best length. It's also suitable for curly hair. When you're cutting the front part, then you can tailor it to the shape of the face. So you can go in any direction. But what we're seeing a lot right now is such a curtain fringe, a curtain bangs party. I take 2 combs, stack them together until the hair is caught in between. I twist my comb and with a cutting technique, I then cut a straight line. I keep it quite long because I really want that soft look on the face. And when I can then bring the passé down, so you see the middle section is a bit shorter, the outside longer, and you can do this very nicely. Such a curtain fringe, you can find that's something we see a lot of at the moment. Might. Once you've cut the bangs, you can then connect it to this side, but this is not necessary. Not. Because imagine if I opted for a shorter pony part, then I really wouldn't make the connection. Now the difference is minimal, and then I'll make the connection. I take a straight or vertical line. Above the ear, I project it forwards at an angle, and with the slicing technique, I make the connection. All you have to do then is follow the outer line a bit to make sure everything aligns nicely. To add more texture to the hair, I'm texturizing it. I do this with my knife using the brush technique. So my knife goes in vertically, I go into the hair and project the knife towards me. This way I am adding texture to the hair. You could also choose to thin out the points even more with a thinning shear. I use the Glam Shine from Royal Kiss. This is a serum that gets absorbed beautifully into the hair, providing softness and shine. Because let's be honest, the hair is bleached and I can blow dry it straight up without any product. I actually want to calm it down and add a nice sheen. I have already bleached this head. You can find that coloring technique in another video of mine on my YouTube channel. I polish the hair nicely, so I comb the hair inwards with a cuticle layer, down there. In the end, when it functions, I'm going to use the Ocean 5 spray from Royal Kiss because I just want to add a swirl with my thick curling iron to create a bit of that beach bird look. To create agenda, with the thick curling iron, I'm going to take sections. And then make sure your curling iron goes into the hair from the top. I take vertical coarse sections and just add that swirl I want to create. This will make my point layering look good, but also the color technique that comes with it. What I still want to mention about the coloring technique, I did this in 14 foils, so it's also a fairly quick coloring technique. But then here, the end result is a beautiful cut for long to medium length hair with a nice coloring technique.